Welcome to the American Association for Paralegal Education, a cornerstone of excellence and advocacy in the field of paralegal education. Founded with a commitment to fostering high standards in paralegal education, the association serves as a pivotal platform for educators, students, and professionals within the paralegal community. Our association is dedicated to enhancing the quality and accessibility of paralegal education, ensuring that our members are equipped with the knowledge, skills, and ethical grounding necessary to excel in the legal profession. Association membership offers unparalleled access to a wealth of resources, including cutting-edge research, professional development opportunities, networking events, and a community of peers committed to the advancement of paralegal education and practice. By joining the association, you become part of a collaborative network that values innovation, excellence, and the continuous improvement of the paralegal profession. In line with our mission to enlighten and inspire, we proudly present the Legal Luminaries podcast series. This initiative extends our commitment to education and professional growth into the digital realm, offering viewers an engaging platform to explore the dynamic world of paralegals. The podcast series complements our association's objectives by providing an in-depth look at the challenges, triumphs, and evolving landscape of the paralegal field. Through conversations with leading figures and experts, Legal Luminaries aims to foster a deeper understanding of the paralegal profession and its critical role in the legal system. Welcome to episode number 1.
Welcome to the first episode of AFP's podcast, Legal Luminaries, focusing on an in-depth exploration into the expansive and evolving realm of paralegals. Designed as a comprehensive resource, the podcast caters to legal practitioners, researchers, educators, students, and professionals in paralegal studies, aiming to illuminate the intricacies of the profession. With me today is my co-host and fellow paralegal educator, Kelly Radnathy. Our guest today is Tara Kim Eberhardt, Director of Business Innovation for Dentons. Welcome, Tara. Tara and I know each other through the Paralegal Association world, but more recently with our involvement with the International Practice Management Association, also known as IPMA. Tara, you are the immediate past president of IPMA, and I understand that this role with Dentons for Director of Business Innovation is a new position for you too. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to have our conversation today. I've been with Dentons for about 15 years. I've had a number of different positions. I like to say I'm a recovering paralegal because at one point I did real work before I managed people or went to the dark side of the business side of law. At Dentons, I have managed paralegals. I have been responsible for working with practice groups, a third of our practice groups for Dentons US. And in my most recent position, which I was just elevated to in January as the head of business innovation for Dentons US, have the opportunity to sort of take a little bit of a lot of that and put it together into a brand new sort of role at Dentons that we can talk about.
So I was wondering, this head of business innovation at Dentons, why was this role created and what does that role mean to you?
So we have about 3 years ago, I joined what we call officially the practice management team at Dentons. It's one of my favorite, aspects of working with Dentons. We have 3 of us that were peers. We came from very different backgrounds within the law firm. So one of us came from very traditional sort of, finance background. One of us came from more traditional clients and markets and sort of strategy background. And then me coming out of sort of the paralegal operations, business processes, we sort of all came to practice management from our different perspectives. In the course of working together, it became clear to us that our backgrounds and the different ways that we approach things were the real strengths of the practice management team. And so I think firm leadership and our CEO, Sonia Martin, and our Chief Operating Officer, Buck Owen, I think saw it as an opportunity for us to work across the business, across the entire Dentons US, and to bring some of those concepts, to how we talk every day at Dentons. We want our practices to lead our conversations, but we also want to be really aware that it really does take every single department, putting in, their different perspective and their effort to make everything at the law firm work. So I think it was a really nice evolution for each of us professionally. And I think it's nice because we still get to sort of come together and work on projects and work on initiatives for the firm. So
that's a really neat background for all three of you to kind of have that, kind of synergy to operate in this role with business innovation. And I'm very fortunate to know you, Tara, for many, many, many years now. And I know that you and I both started off in a small firm role as paralegals. And for our listeners who are maybe just starting off their career journeys, I kind of wanted you to share a little bit about what that was like for you to start off in that role as, a paralegal in the trenches, doing the work and having this amazing career trajectory all the way through to where you are today. I'd just love for you to share that.
So I started out at a 6-attorney firm in Fairfax County of Virginia. I like to say, raking my heels across the gravel, walking through the back parking lot to court on a daily basis. It was a family law firm, and it was a really great place to have, my first experience as a paralegal, because anytime the lawyers met with a client, I got to be in the room. Anytime we went to court, I got to go with them. Anytime, that the client called in, I was very visible and forward facing. So it was a great opportunity to learn. Very intimidating sometimes because I was the only paralegal in the firm. And so you don't have the benefit of being able to go to a more experienced paralegal and sort of whispering, like, how do you really do this? I had to really sort of, be very forward facing, with the lawyers as well, and be straightforward about, look, I've done this before, or I haven't done this before. But luckily for me, the main partner loved to teach. And so it was a great opportunity. But that's also sort of where I found my love of paralegal associations, Christine, which is where, you and I met. When you're the only paralegal that's, in a particular law firm, you have to find your people, right? You have to find your group that you can ask questions of, and you can, sort of, figure it out as you go. I had great paralegal educators, so that was a great start. But when you get within the law firm environment, you've got to find your sort of continuing learning buddies, if you will. And I was really fortunate that after working in the small law firm, one of the lawyers that I worked with had an engineering background, and he went into an IP boutique. And, after he had been gone for about 3 months, he called me and said, I know you don't know anything about patents, right? Or anything about intellectual property law, but you have tons of in-trial experience and trial experience. And a lot of the IP paralegals, because IP paralegals don't tend to go to trials that often, when they do go, it's for weeks and months at a time. If you'll come over and work with them and show them, how to go to trial, we'll teach you about patents. And I thought, well, that's a great opportunity, right? So I went to Obolon Spivak, which at the time was one of the largest IP boutiques in the DC area. They issued the most patents for like 20 years in a row. So they just nationwide. So they were just, an amazing machine of where to learn process and how to do things within a particular area of law. And I met some other paralegals, and it was nice to sort of be on a team where I had colleagues that did what I did.
And I love how you just touched on that, education and mentorship there. So I'm curious about the role that education's played in your own career development and then success, and really how that's kind of laid the path for you to mentor or teach other paralegals too.
So I sort of discovered the paralegal profession. Each of us, I'm always interested when I was, I had the opportunity later in my career to teach. I would always ask students, how did you discover the paralegal profession? Because it's not one of those professions that you get the coloring book, right? And like you flip the pages and you have all the different vocations. Right. We don't tend to sort of get our own page, and sort of people find the profession in different ways and then learn to love it. But I found it because I was going through a incredibly horrific international divorce, which I do not recommend as a way to find the law. But I spent a lot of time with the paralegal for the law firm that was handling my divorce, and learned a lot about the Hague Convention and service of process internationally, and what to do and what not to do because of my great military background. So that was really important when I sort of found that I, was navigating something that I didn't know. I thought, this is something that I'm really interested in. And so I enrolled post my 4-year education in a paralegal certificate program, which was a really nice complement to my 4-year education. It gave me, a year and a half, 2 years of very specific training that then I was able to sort of hit the ground running and to find that first paralegal position. At various points in my career, I'm a lifelong learner. My mom is an educator. My dad, I think, is always in school at one point of his military career or another. So in my family, you're always either sort of learning what you're doing, you're working on your next degree, or you're trying to figure out how to get back to school, because we love doing that. So after I had worked at Oblon Spivak, I really discovered that I was starting to lead larger teams. And I was starting to get more into the financial management of managing a budget, managing a project budget, being asked to sort of do things that had more financial implications. And so I decided to go back to school and to get a master's in legal administration at Marymount. So 4-year degree, then my paralegal certificate. Then later in my career, 10 years later, I went back and got a master's and then did a whole bunch of other sort of, certifications and other stuff as my career sort of called for it over the last, 2 decades.
I love how you really shared how you availed these educational opportunities as a lifelong learner. As paralegal educators, Kelly and I both very much believe in that as a strong foundation for building a very successful career. And I don't know if you've heard of this term that's been going around. It's like one of the buzziest terms around, but durable skills, formerly known as soft skills. So I'm just wondering, what did you do? You said you built relationships with mentors and other paralegals and built a community to help you access those hard skills on how to be the best paralegal, IP paralegal, when those opportunities presented themselves. But I'm wondering, how does durable skills, or how did those soft skills work into this success equation for you?
It's interesting because the term hard skill, soft skill actually came out of the military, right? And so sometimes, soft skills gets sort of the, hey, you have to be substantively competent in what you're doing. And then there's sort of the other stuff. But a lot of times, especially when you're in larger law firms and you're working on larger teams, that other stuff, right, is what gets you opportunities, or gets your name out there, or stops you from getting opportunities. And so sometimes paralegals who are highly competent in their skills can't figure out why they're not getting, different opportunities within their own organization. And some of that may be because of the soft skill side of the house. So for me, one of the things that's always been super important is to admit what I don't know and to ask others for input. Somebody really way smarter than me one time said, a lot of times we ask for feedback, and feedback is just a snapshot of someone else's opinion of you in time. Right? Input is, how can I do this better? What is it that, would be sort of more beneficial? What is it that you think that, I'm doing where I'm getting in my own way, or I could be more open to exploring how to do things a little bit differently that maybe would align me better with my team, or give me other opportunities, or let me see something in a different way that I'm not currently seeing it. So so for me, I, have tried in my career to always ask for input. And that isn't just from people who supervise me. Some of the best input you can get is from peers. Some of the best input you can get is from others who work on the team with you. And I think that once you ask for input, it creates an environment where people are comfortable talking to you about how they could work best, how you work best, and how you can work best together. So, and I think sometimes we get really hung up, especially in our environments where underlining the comma means it's right or it's wrong, or, making sure that, we've got, things, plumb perfect, that we forget we spend a lot of time at work. We want to, be in an environment where we are energized and it's positive and it's, we're getting, to do interesting work, right? In addition to the billable hours that we need to check things off, or, the next milestone that we need to get to whatever point in our career.
We recently learned that Dentons is the first and only polycentric law firm with no national headquarters. So how you were just talking about, creating and fostering this collaborative team effort to ensure that, the work product is the best that you can get. How do you foster that collaboration and empower that culture of innovation, through relationship building really across the globe? I mean, Dentons is across the globe, right? So how do you do that?
Yes, Dentons is global. Yes, we're in 180 plus countries. Yes, we have over 10,000 lawyers. But you have to remember that at our core, we're a culmination and an amalgamation of a whole bunch of regional firms that came together that all had those really great sort of communities and those ways of practicing. And so, especially here in the US, right, we have rich traditions from Sun and Shine in Chicago, from Salem's and, New York, from, McKenna Long, from all of the legacy firms that came together to, form Dentons. They had those very relationship-based ways of working. So, we've had to sort of work out, when you bring all of those different ideas together, it's a lot of ideas, right, to figure out how to do something. But as we come together and we sort of harness how we're going to practice, and we think about things in a process-oriented way, we have a lot of people who have a lot of different experiences from a lot of different backgrounds. And so I think that just breeds a sense of sort of innovation and entrepreneurship sort of within Dentons. We have to be careful because it's great because we can move fast and make decisions and sort of change things because we aren't as ingrained, right, as maybe some, other law firms. But we also have to be careful, right, to be deliberate and thoughtful and, be aware that, sometimes a lot of change can be daunting for people. And we've got to make it less scary and more accessible. So I think that's what we try to do, is to really think about how we can sort of include people in that process. And that's one of the reasons why I was sort of excited about this head of business innovation opportunity, because I already work with a third of the practice groups directly in the US. I've had the opportunity to work with all of the practice groups when I was working with different populations. I work with the docketing department, I work with the research department. So that's a very unique perspective within a large law firm where sometimes you have a tendency to get siloed. And I think that's one of the things that is, super attractive for me, because I don't really love to be in a box, and Dentons sort of allows me, it's a very big box, right? In that sense, where I don't sort of get a sense of being limited in what I'm doing. So.
That's really the definition of innovation, right, Tara? I mean, to really give you that space to develop and be curious and to test things, to fail and try again, right? I think that's really neat that you're given that kind of opportunity in this, especially in this role as the Director of Business Innovation. And I'm wondering how because I know that you do a lot for the community, including your most current gig as past president of IPMA. And that's actually when I joined IPMA, is under your leadership, and I learned a lot. And just watching your leadership style and the way that you communicate, which is a huge component of leadership. Do you have like a vision for yourself? I mean, as a person who's grown so much in your career, do you have like a vision for yourself, or do you have a legacy that you hope to leave behind in doing this incredible work? Because like I said, just watching your leadership through IPMA, you implemented some incredible programs. And I served on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee during your tenure as president. So I wanted you to kind of talk about that, if you would.
So it's always interesting to me because when people sort of ask me, get to this, stage of your career and people ask you about the successes that you've had, I think especially for people that are, joining the profession, first of all, I messed up a lot of stuff, right? So there were a lot of moments that were, those sort of butterflies in the stomach, like, that probably wasn't the best way to do that. Or, hey, I thought I understood, what the team really wanted. I got super close, and then I had a really patient lawyer that sort of pulled me to the side and said, it'd probably be better if we do it this way. So yes, there's, right now, I really enjoy working with different teams, and I enjoy getting them to really think about thought leadership, right? And not just task-based sort of, orientation. I think sometimes, especially coming out of COVID, we all sort of got really overwhelmed. We moved from thinking long-term to thinking in a very short-term way. If I can just get through this week, if I can just get through this time period, if I can just get to sort of, whatever the next milestone is. And we went from being really long-term thinkers, like what's my 3 to 5 year plan, to how do I get to this summer? How do I get to Friday, right? And I think now we've got to sort of unlearn that. And we've got to think about, hey, there's a nice balance to thinking about how do I hit some of those immediate milestones. But there's also a big benefit from not getting overwhelmed by the now and really stepping back every once in a while and taking a couple minutes to look at what you've accomplished, right? So I think if you're asking me with some of the things that I'm choosing to lend my energy to now, or that I really like to work on, I think it's about a little bit of giving back to the profession that has been, amazingly kind to me. It's, getting people to realize that, again, the paralegal, profession and legal, sometimes we lead with, all of the stereotypical stories, right? About, big law, or, sort of, how stressful it is, but I've met some of my absolute favorite people working in law. I've had, successes where I've worked on trials for inventors who at the end of the trial broke down in tears because their lifelong work that they worked on got defended in a patent litigation. So there's, we've worked on pro bono cases where, we just were able to get people exonerated, or we've, dealt with folks, from, a reimbursement opportunity where they were underpaid. So there's a lot of good stuff in legal. And yes, there's some of the stereotypical stuff too. But I think that's what I like spending my energy on now, Christine, is really, some of the projects like that we worked on, for IPMA, or some of the things that help, schools. I'm really proud to, be affiliated with the George Washington University Paralegal Program. And, one of the highlights of my career was one year I not only received the top faculty award from my fellow professors, which was amazing, but that same year I received the award from the students, which, if I'm being honest, meant a lot to me, because students can be super hard graders. So
true. It's a tough audience at times. Obviously throughout your career, you've been involved in developing and building paralegal programs, not just, in your day job, but also as an educator, right? So what are some key elements that you believe are essential for implementing, successful paralegal programs, both institutionally and organizationally?
I think the most important thing is that we've got to talk to each other, right? People who are, educators, there's a lot of people who are, hiring our graduates and hiring folks coming out of our programs. And we've really got to talk to them about what type of environment are we preparing people for? What are the things, soft skills, hard skills, durable skills, that are really going to be the market differentiators, right? So our students can get hired and get opportunities to show how great they are and get their foot in the door, which is super hard for their first job, right? Coming out of school. I think for people that are, in law firms or in, corporate environments that hire paralegals, we've got to talk about the skills that we really need, especially the technology skills. And we've got to find a way to sort of match the substantive, black letter law and content-based stuff with the technology, which is super critical right now to really differentiate our students, and the durable or soft skills where we're going to want to spend time with that person. We're going to want them on our team, and we're going to want to, help them be successful, because again, you can have really highly skilled people that are obnoxious and you don't want to spend any time with. or you can have people who, are just amazing at, just never giving up. They just have amazing resiliency and they have amazing sort of get up and go. And those are the people that managers, educators, we all want to put our time into, right? And help them be successful. But we've got to talk to each other. I think sometimes, we have really great conversations, but they're siloed conversations. And that's why I think it's important, for all of us that have the opportunity to work in law firms with paralegals, to then get involved in education and vice versa.
That is so true, Tara. I couldn't agree with you more wholeheartedly with regard to the advisory committees of these paralegal programs. It's so mission critical, right, for the success of our students to have those real-time practitioners. And I loved how you brought up technology. That is something that is incredibly important to the modern day paralegal. It's a non-negotiable skill anymore, and I'm wondering, how do you stay on top of the trends and developments and methodologies yourself? Because you are an educator as well. You were with GW, and in the role that you're in now, I'm sure you do a lot of mentoring still. So how do you yourself stay abreast of everything?
When I'd given up what I call real work, right, doing real direct client service work as a paralegal, one of the ways that I kept in touch with my skill set is by teaching. I decided, to teach the litigation course so that my site checking and my, case map and my relativity and, all of those skills that I had fought really hard for as a paralegal, that I would retain and be able to, again, not lose perspective once you go to management and your life is spreadsheets and, productivity schedules and, and workflow and all of those really important things, but not as directly connected to the work. So that's what I did for 15 semesters, is I said, it's really important to me to be connected to the energy of students. And, we use the term red well. A student asked me, well, why do we call it a red well, right? Or hey, Bates numbers. We all know that we just sort of call things by their name, or we use acronyms, and students are great to go, yeah, I don't know what that acronym is, or I don't know why we call it that. And it sort of reminds you, again, when you're using a lexicon for a particular type of law, that's something that we've learned over time, and it just makes you become more aware. So teaching was one of the ways that I kept up some of those skills, and then as I was, getting sort of farther and farther away from the work, I started looking and working more on process-based conversations, right? So it's not as critical for me to know how to hit all of the individual buttons on something, right? It's important for me to know why the system would be used, what's the best in breed, why would we choose one over the other, to listen to the input from the people actually using the tools. I was really excited when I was at GW. I was able to work with some of the technology companies to give us licenses, for the students. So we got case map. So all of our students, would be able to do a project in case map during the litigation course. We had access to some of the other transactional programs, within the more corporate, focused courses. I think it's important, even if you're just introducing people to that technology, to make them aware of what the technology is. And again, you may use, relativity versus a summation versus a, Clearwell versus Orange versus Disco versus whatever the name is, right? But it's a litigation database. And if you're working in large scale litigation, you got to be able to use, a litigation database and understand the difference between manually tagging things, right? And setting up your tag system. And it's just a way of thinking that we need our students to, be aware of, so that when they go into a law firm or in-house corporate, maybe the technology is going to be a little bit different, but they're going to go, oh, that's what it does. Okay, I've got a base of operations and I can learn that specific tool because I understand the concepts from, my program. So.
Well, I love that we've, shifted focus to these advancements in technology, because these changes, in the legal landscape influence pretty much every role within the law firm or legal department, right? So, particularly in the realm of business operations, which you've kind of been touching on. So what strategies have you employed with the teams that you work with to stay up to date? I mean, Christine talked about, how you stay up to date, but how do you encourage your teams to also stay up to date and in the industry that they're practicing in?
It used to be, from a technology perspective, we were sort of going through sort of a linear transition where we would say, okay, this is the program of today and platform of today, then tomorrow. The whole universe of AI, we're going to leapfrog. We're going to leapfrog over sort of our traditional way of approaching that. And we're going to think more from a, okay, how do I use structured versus unstructured data? How do I make those connections? If I'm getting information for one purpose, how do I use it more holistically throughout the law firm for other purposes? I work with the docketing department at Dentons. And when I started working with the docketing department, the docketing professionals were very kind to me, right? They were like, okay, understand that, your background, you have never been a quote docketing professional. And I said, nope, I have never been a docketing professional, but I've been a client of docketing, right? I've been a paralegal. We've used docketing. Docketing certainly is super critical in a lot of the tracking and project and practice management projects that I work on. And here's how I think of docketing. I think of docketing as data, right? So you're going to use data in one way in order to reduce risk and get us into compliance. But docketing really is a knowledge management hub for the firm. It's one of the few places where you can go and say, what's happening in the future? Every other system we have in a law firm is designed to show you what's already happened. The docket is designed to show you what's coming up. And when you think of it that way, and you think of the data from docketing in that perspective, then the docketing manager becomes a data administrator, right? Not just a docketing manager. And so I think that's how we sort of have to think within, our organizations now is what data do you have, or have you been asked to sort of pull together in whatever program? And then now it's all about getting that data out of the program and being able to utilize it in so many different ways. So then we're not duplicating efforts or using a lot of labor, right, to move things from system to system, or we can actually think about how do we leverage AI in a smart way in order to automate things so that our team can spend more time on higher functioning tasks and more value-added tasks.
Important. That's such an important conversation to have with educators as well, so that they understand. And I think that's actually one of the presentations that Carl and I did for IPMA is the paraprofessional of the future. What does that look like? Because it's kind of a hybridized role now, having the paralegal knowledge and that substantive knowledge we learn through our paralegal programs and through our on-the-job training. But, there's a couple things, and Kelly and I as educators talk about this, when we're brainstorming, we co-speak a lot. And so we said, there's a couple things come up when we're like talking with students, coaching, because we look at ourselves as coaches too. And we say competence, which is what we're here for, right? We're here to help educate you, train you in the substantive law. But then there's this confidence piece. Right. So the competence, but the confidence, this is kind of a two-pronged question. How do you deal with that? Because I can only imagine the level of pressure you may feel in a role that is a director role for such a large law firm. Right. But then I'm also thinking about like students and new paralegals and people who are kind of just coming up in their journey. How do they build that confidence muscle? And then as educators, how do we encourage that in our students? How do we parlay that in our curriculum and content?
I think that law firms, especially big law, cater to extroverts. And we cater to people who think that showing confidence is speaking in public and presenting information. But if you haven't read The Quiet Introvert, which is a great book, and you haven't sort of studied different personalities, sometimes the introvert who is in your meeting is the one who sort of has it all together. They're just not, that's not necessarily the forum in which they're going to shine or that they choose to present or share information. So I think first of all, we've got to sort of rethink what we think confidence looks like. I grew up being a military brat. So I was always the new kid in school, right? I was always the person on the bus the first day. Had to figure out where to sit in the cafeteria and didn't have any friends. And so, I just had to get over being, shy or being hesitant to reach out to people, because that just, became my nature. I moved 26 times before I went to college, to 26 states and 3 countries. So just tons of moving and being the new kid. And then when I was in high school and college, my dad thought it would be a great idea for me to do debate and Model UN. So I did a ton, 8 years of just public speaking, over and over and over again. And I think that was super helpful for me to, exhibit what people would think of as extroverted, sort of confidence. But I really think in law firms, and the more I manage people, the more I grow to respect sort of different personality profiles. And I think that's really important for us to think about, because, I have some students who, if you ask them to stand up in front of the class and do a presentation, that is their nightmare. Other students that would do that in 2 seconds. But the students, again, who don't feel as comfortable standing up and doing, a presentation, are also the ones that are going to sort of sit down and solve like the world's problems in a couple of hours and, give us a great memo on it, right? So we have to meet people where they are, and we have to give them opportunities to shine in their own way. And I think as managers and educators, I think we have to think about that, right? So if we're doing online teaching, that, questions can come in different ways. Work product can come in different ways. Interaction can happen in different ways. And that's why when I was president of IPMA, one of the things that was super important to me is to create an online community for our members, because during the pandemic and afterwards, we went to a very meeting-based, professional association, as everybody did. But that, again, caters to an extroverted, personality, right? And so I wanted to create a community where you could have online forums, and you could have questions, and you could have, the ability for people at all hours of the day, no matter what time zone they were on, to contribute or ask questions or get content from the association. So, I do think that, it is inescapable that if you get to a certain level within, the profession, that you're going to be doing, presentations, or you're going to be asked to lead meetings or to lead teams, or, that's going to be a part of what they ask you to do. But you can find other things where, if you are less inclined to be, extroverted and overt, you can still sort of shine and be confident.
The theme of that sort of is, this inclusion, belonging, diversity, right? Autonomy of thought. And so I guess I'm curious what your thoughts would be is how do we ensure that our paralegal programs, both within law firms and within educational settings, that they align with the future workforce, both like the employee and employer goals and values, knowing that we have to provide autonomy of how something is, observed and retained and applied. How do you think we ensure success of those types of skills?
I think it's hard because, traditionally we look to people who are leading the team or leading the project, right? Whoever that lawyer is. So part of what I've tried to do is encourage the lawyers who are introverts, right? To not always accept sort of the standard format of how we interact, like it is possible when we're using Teams to send a template out or send a poll out and to get feedback. We don't all have to jump on a meeting, right? And do that. There's other ways to collect input. There's other ways to say, where are you on a project? And we start getting sort of, different personality types to think about how we're working. I do a whole conversation about synchronous versus asynchronous work. In a law firm, we tend to do lots of things synchronously, right? Lawyer is thinking about X within 15 seconds. The associate and the paralegal should be thinking about X because we're all working on it together. Versus saying, here's a project, here's what you're going to do, here's what I'm going to do, here's when the deliverable needs to be, the draft needs to be together, or, so that you can work asynchronously and people can choose how they're going to get to the deadline. It doesn't mean we get to all negotiate when the deadline is. We have to deliver things, to the client when we're, asked to do that. But it does mean that we can have, I think, a little bit more autonomy how we get there. People want to work different times of the day. People want to work in different ways than we've historically worked, right? This idea of we all go into work at 8:30 and we all leave at whatever time, at the end of the day, doesn't work for everyone, right? People want more flexibility. They want more autonomy. And it's really nice to sort of, see our newer generations in the workforce. That isn't sort of a conversation for them. It's a given. Now they need to be a little bit kinder and gentler to the rest of us that are catching up with them sometimes, right? Because, we still have, 4 generations in the workforce, and those are very different ideas of how we all get to the same place. And there is still a power, differential within organizations, right? It's not a democracy. We all have to, get things sort of together, and there are reasons sometimes why, a partner is going to ask for things to be done a certain way, even though it appears to other people on the team not to be the most efficient or the best process-driven way to get there. But sometimes there is a method to the madness, and we've all got to lean in a little bit. But I think there's hope, because we've got to have those cross-generational conversations. And that's one of the things that I love about the paralegal profession is we've got folks that are coming right out of, 2-year schools or, going into paralegal certificate programs. We've got people coming out of all sorts. We've also got a really robust group of career changers, right, who have done other things and are discovering the paralegal profession and bring an entirely different perspective to our classrooms, to our teams. And I think, that's why people would steal people from my team at Denton's all the time, is because when you've got that background and you're used to adapting to different working styles, we can teach things that are very hard skilled. You can't teach certain ways of, organization, working with teams, approach, or flexibility. It's way harder to sort of, do that. So I would have people steal people from my teams all the time. And I took that as an amazing compliment. And then I had to go, figure out how to still get the stuff done that the team needed to get done. So
I love that, Tara, that you bring up this kind of, there's a method to the madness, and there's many ways to get to a certain point, right? It's not always just a very linear thing, right? And one of our favorite sayings, Kelly and myself, is be the water. Know how to flex and flow like the water. So I love that you say that. And I think it's really interesting too that you said that you're military kids. So am I, and so is Kelly. And I think there's that resiliency that's kind of built into us because of that experience, that common experience. And we're all lifelong learners, we're all educators. So I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and just kind of winding down and closing out our conversation. And we thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom. But, as far as resources, this is how we empower others, right? And all of us learn differently. And I love how you kind of brought that forward too. Are there, and I know this about you too, you're a big reader like I am. And even in IPMA, we would talk about, we should have like a book club, and we should, talk about, what are you reading? So that I want to know, what is Tara reading? What do you have? Resources, books, audiobooks, podcasts, all of the above? How do you keep yourself educated?
I listen to podcasts. I do a lot of, webinars, especially on new technologies. But I love to read. My mom is a reading specialist. And from the time we were, really young, it was, all about reading. So every year I do a 52 book challenge. My goal is, so I've done it the last 3 years, and I've done 50 plus books every year. I read one time, from Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and really successful people, that they said that the difference was reading, right? Like they set aside time every day to get ideas from outside of their bubble, and that the more diverse the topics were, the better. So what I'm reading right now, I have the Checklist Manifesto. It's one of my favorite books. I'm rereading it because I'm starting as the head of business innovation to sort of think about some different checklists and some different things that I want to put together. And I thought that would be sort of good to go back and reread it. I'm always reading a biography about some, person that I find particularly interesting. So right now I'm reading the story of Peggy Bartlett, who is a woman who was actually from Ghana, and she worked in the Ghanaian embassy. And one day her family in Ghana called her and said that the king of their local village had passed away, and that the elders had selected her as the new king of their village. And so she was working as a secretary in DC and suddenly became the king of a village in Ghana. And it's just a very interesting sort of, story of how she found the way to connect with both sides of her life, and funny too, making some of those. So I'm always reading something about I love Adam Grant. If you've been anywhere near me, anything that comes out by Adam Grant is my favorite. He just had a new book out last fall. But that's some of the things, on my current reading list. And I'm really excited that at IPMA we were able to include, now every year at conference, we have a session where we select books and we get to sort of share some of our favorites.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Tara, so much today for shedding light on the power of connections, durable skills, education, and partnerships in the legal field. Your inspiring journey and the insights that you've shared certainly enriched our understanding of the importance of innovation. To our listeners, we appreciate you joining us on this inaugural episode of AFP's Legal Luminaries. We hope Tara's experiences have sparked some contemplation on the profound impact of cultivating these meaningful connections within our communities. For those eager to explore further, we've included some relevant links in the show notes below. And as we wrap up, we'd like to leave you with a thought-provoking question. Who would you interview if you could sit across from anyone and ask them questions for 20 minutes? So we encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions with us. And thank you once again. We look forward to having you with us on the next episode of AFP's Legal Luminaries. Until then, keep forging these connections and building the relationships that illuminate the legal landscape. Until next time.